everyone, welcome to today's episode of Wake the Future. So today we are going to talk about AI hype versus AI reality. Now there have been some things that we've come across recently where there are several examples of companies that have implemented AI strategies or products and they are starting to reverse course. So we've talked before about how it's not going to be about human replacement, but rather a full reshaping of the workforce. And that is what we are starting to see more and more. So before I turn it over to Jared, there were two articles that I came across this week from a few weeks ago. One was in Inc., one was in CNBC. They are both linked below in the comments, so go and check them out. But I just want to go through three very recent examples of companies in three different sectors that have implemented AI in three different ways. And each one of them have kind of done their own like timeout moment. This isn't working for us. We need to bring humans back. Now, one of the big companies that did this last year was Klarna, right? That made really big news. But let me go through three other examples, and then Jared's gonna really reframe this through the lens of musical chairs. So the first is IBM. What did IBM recently do? They replaced so much of its human resources function with AI that it handled around 94% of routine requests, but it was unable to meet the other 6%. And then they're like, oh, wait, AI cannot actually deal with any of the ethical dilemmas, and we need to bring humans back in, right? Shocker of the century, surprise, surprise, duh. So they announced plans to triple its US entry-level hiring across all business units then in 2026 to try to address this. Ford Motor Company, they spent the last 3 years hiring 350 veteran engineers to address vehicle quality problems that automated systems had failed to catch. So the root cause was an assumption error. They had wrongly assumed that feeding AI its design requirements would produce a high quality product. Again, surprise of the century, right? Like, of course, human oversight was needed. And the third example was CBA, so the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. And this is a customer service example. So they refocused on human capital after making layoffs. And last year, CBA had laid off 40 customer service staff, replaced them with an AI bot, and the system was so overloaded, it was unable to cope. Then they saw an increase in calls, and then they're like, wait, this isn't working, and they reversed the job cuts. So again, each one of these examples doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that certain major facets of the equation needed a human back in. But in its entirety, it's pointing to something else that's really happening out there.
I love this theme, by the way. We can go through countless examples here of investment in and utilization of AI that up until now seems to be working and seems to be creating, real, I would say measurable results for the companies that are doing it. There are hundreds and hundreds of examples. And there are hundreds and hundreds of examples, these among them, where it's not working as it was designed.
Yep.
So we could find great examples and we could find not so great examples. I think the point of this is that, every time we do one of these themes, it makes me think of a couple of things that we've already been speaking about. And that's the beauty of it. Like all of this stuff is linked together. Some of it is stuff we've talked about in the very recent past, and some of it is almost a revisiting of things we talked about years ago, even before the AI landscape. And as you're talking about this right now, I'm thinking about a theme that you and I kind of coined years and years ago called enterprises. Enterprise with a Z. And the whole idea was that at the time, and this was before the AI rush, AI was starting to come to play, but people were talking about the metaverse and virtual reality and crypto and the blockchain. And it was this idea that leaders of companies were so eager to show that they were contemporary, to show that they were relevant, to show that they were on the tech adoption curve, that they were making a rush to invest in all of these things without thinking through the use cases. Like, what are we actually going to get from this long term? Is it going to be sustainable? What are the success metrics, and can we get there? And so we talked about this idea of enterprises, which was instead of just investing in all of these technologies, being really purposeful and picking the right ones that are going to be the wins for your company in the future. And that was the whole concept behind enterprises. Fast forward to where we are today, and you have this AI land rush, and everyone is investing in AI. It is a true technological and corporate keeping up with the Joneses. And everyone has to show that they're contemporary and that they at least understand where AI is going, because it is in part going to underpin the future of business. But unfortunately, so many people were in such a hurry to make these investments that for every use case that seems to be working, there is a use case where things are falling apart. And of course, the bottom line, as you mentioned, is that humans in the loop becomes critical. In many cases, we even talk about humans as the loop. That's really where we have to reframe this, is that humans still have to be at the center with AI servicing them. But more than anything, this does relate to this concept of musical chairs. We introduced this concept a few months ago, And I'm going to be hammering this home constantly because to me, it's the simplest visual for where we're going as a job market. And the core concept of musical chairs was simply that, to oversimplify, let's say there are 20 chairs in a room and that represents the workforce, the human workforce. That over the course of time, the music is constantly going to be playing and people are constantly going to be shuffling those chairs and chairs are going to get pulled. And that's what's happened. And even if we start adding chairs back in, and in some cases we're going to see this, humans are going to be re-employed because they were preemptively disposed of. I still think that it's going to net out to being fewer humans directly employable in the white collar or the knowledge economy because of AI. So if we started with 20 chairs and it's cut down to 14, and then people realize maybe we should add 3 more, and now we're back to 17 chairs, that's fine. But we're still not at 20, and I don't think we ever will be. So this concept of musical chairs is a dynamic one.
Well, so let's talk about a couple things. There are 2 aspects to it. There is the composition of the person sitting in the chair itself.
Yes.
And then there's the composition of the chair.
Exactly.
So the whole thing is, I think the mental math that we oftentimes do, and I want to frame the conversation around this, is that you pull a chair out.
Yeah.
Right. And then it gets reconfigured and the chair goes back in. The same chair is not being added to the circle. The chair shape, construction, formulation, materials,
that's the way of looking at it,
has been changed. So even for these examples, as they bring people back in, it's not like there are pre-existing holes to be plugged. And then they're like, oh, wait, we laid off all of these people, replaced them with AI, we're pulling back on AI, and then people are coming back in. It's not a 1-for-1. So the composition of the jobs in and of themselves are starting to shift, because then I would argue that the most forward-thinking companies are the ones that can learn the lessons of their AI failures. And they're like, you know what? This didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. If an AI voice bot comes in and supplants so many aspects of customer service, and then calls skyrocket, and they're like, oh my God, maybe it didn't understand nuance, ambiguity, tone, emotion, all of these,
or
the
AI
whole
systems, or AI systems that have been charged with basically running the HR function and all hiring and screening. And now you're finding out that there are inherent biases that are actually ruining that process, to your point.
But then the whole thing is, if you are then plugging people back into the same holes / roles that they occupied, then it's like just pouring old wine in new bottles. So I think those that are going to get it right will be those that do reshape versus replace the workforce, but reemploy people in redesigned and reconstituted job roles.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. And I think that this
the chair comes back, the chair just changes shape.
There's a different design to the chair. We're sourcing different textiles for the chair. I love that visual. To pick up on your last point here, I think this has 2 very basic lessons for leadership. And you and I are generally not in the leadership advice business. There are a lot of gurus out there that write books about leadership. They're a dime a dozen. But I will say that there are 2 basic lessons that are coming out here. Number 1, related to what I said a few minutes ago about enterprises, is this idea that leaders have to stop being impulsive and just giving into the whims of their stakeholders, whether those are investors or other people, and stop saying and lead in a way that you're not giving into pressure, marketplace pressure, but you're being very intentional in how you invest in technology like AI. Again, what are the success metrics and can you make it sustainable? Number 2 is what you're talking about, which is having
a lot of success metrics. The old ones are going to be totally inadequate.
That's exactly
Again,
right.
I would say the forward-looking companies of the future will be the ones that can redefine what their metrics are when there are no pre-existing conditions.
Well, and that leads to my second point here, which is that I think another very, very important and successful component of leadership in the future is going to be having the humility to pivot immediately, to instead of doubling down on something which is not working, is to immediately understand, okay, this is not working the way we had intended for it to work, so now we have to pivot. Now, that's not to say to scrap your ultimate vision.
But I love the word you said, it's humility. And
it is humility.
Many people lack the humility.
Humble and aware leadership. It is responsive leadership. Here's the thing, and this is not rocket science, but I'm not saying that people should abandon their vision. We talk about the need to stick by your vision, whatever your vision of your company is. This is really abandoning tactics or strategies that are not working and doing so very quickly. And we've talked for decades about the needs to be able to abandon strategies because things are changing so quickly. That's on steroids right now. So here's the thing. If you invest in new AI architecture for your company, enterprise-wide AI architecture, certainly in certain silos like HR, marketing, like what you're talking about, and it's not working, you have 2 choices. You can view it as, we just haven't seen it through yet, and double and triple down on that. And in some cases that might work, but more often than not, we're seeing cautionary tales where, nope, if you double down, you're digging yourself a deeper hole. So how do you pivot? Now, you can admit a mistake. Now, it also doesn't mean that you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, which is that you're not abandoning AI. In fact, what you're thinking is we have to now be much smarter about how we utilize AI to ultimately achieve our vision, but it's got to take a slightly different path. And you know what? That's okay. There is no guidebook to this. AI as an enterprise-wide tool is something which really has only been adopted for the last 3 to 5 years, depending on who you talk to, depending on the type of models you're talking about. So this is still in its earliest stages. Most leaders, as smart as they are, coming back to humility, do not have the humility to admit they don't fully understand it. They want to sound smarter than everyone else in the room. You see it on LinkedIn, you see it everywhere. It is nauseating. And here's the thing, have humility and say, okay, we weren't sure how this was going to work. Now we're going to pivot. Now let's set up a new roadmap for the next 12 to 24 months and see what happens at that point in time. Going back to the workforce issue, that's going to lead to a lot of people coming back into the workplace, being shuffled around. The jobs might not look exactly the same. My basic thesis is that while a lot of those chairs are going to be replaced, they're going to look different, they're going to move, they're going to shuffle, that there are still going to be fewer chairs ultimately than there were to begin with. But let's be clear, if AI does its job correctly, a lot of the lower level, entry level, and more mundane and rote functions that humans have been doing in the knowledge economy should go away. And they are going away. And that's just the way technology works.
Yeah. Again, as they currently exist and are designed. But like I always go back to one of my favorite Maslow quotes, and I say it like—
And you love quoting this guy.
I do, because I love the visual as it pertains to AI, which is if the only tool you're given is a hammer, you tend to view everything as a nail.
Yep.
And when I say that, what I mean is, especially on the enterprise side, there are really just two questions that you have to ask yourself, which is what problem am I solving for and who does it benefit?
Yes.
And I always come back to those same two questions, because a lot of companies might think they are very clearly solving for the first piece. They're like, yes, I know exactly the problem that I am solving for, but it's only the forward-thinking ones that can solve for that second question, which I always say is around redeployment and reallocation, which basically is if you are solving for the people piece, then you are, again, not putting them into roles that have existed in the same way for the last 40, 50, 60 years, where it's like, I'm an accountant and my job responsibilities are X, Y, and Z. And you're like, okay, then if AI can come and do X percentage of my job, how am I redeployed to do different thinking? And yes, there probably are going to be significantly fewer chairs. But then the question is, like, entry-level jobs, right, as they exist now, there's no, like, what is the role of a first-year legal associate when it's just research? There's no deeper analysis. It's just pulling out case studies. Right. And that can be done by AI. But if you reimagine how the first-year associate is actually deployed in a firm and, like, have some foresight and some, like, imagination as to what that role contains, again, a lot of this can be solved for. We're just still stuck in these old ways of thinking about labor and employment and jobs.
The only way for the best outcomes, when people talk about the utopian applications of AI to manifest, is if we completely reconceive of core elements of our economy.
Yeah.
And people are either unwilling to do that, or they're unable to do it, or the powers that be don't have the incentives to do that. So that might make a lot of sense to us commoners, because we're like, okay, you're going to be pulling these chairs out. You're going to be pulling the rug out from under us. But you know what? If the promise eventually is that we're going to have better jobs, or the jobs we do have, we're going to be able to spend more of our time doing the things that are truly value added and rewarding, that sounds great. Or maybe we don't all have to work in traditional ways anymore because there'll be so much abundance of knowledge and wisdom. But to get there, the entire structure of the economy has to change. Right. And that's not happening anytime in the next 20, 30 years. We're in a situation today where we're seeing all of this volatility. These case studies are going to magnify. If we wanted to revisit this episode in 2 months, we would see probably
3 of dozens.
We would see dozens, if not hundreds, of more prominent examples of companies that are changing the weights on the scale in terms of, okay, we have to pull back on this, we have to add more of this. So the bottom line here, again, is I think that people who are in key decision-making positions, whether it's the CEO or other people running business functions, they have to start thinking much more intentionally about why we're doing what we're doing, how we're deploying our resources. Again, it's okay to make mistakes, but how do we respond to those mistakes? Do we double down on those mistakes, or do we say, okay, now it is time for us to rethink this and pivot, because things don't look the same today as they did 6 months ago or 18 months ago? And I think that's where the rubber meets the road. This is the same thing that happened during COVID. During COVID, remember, we were talking about the fact that certain companies were doing really, really well in very, very uncharted circumstances, and other companies were falling apart. Certain industries were better positioned than others because of supply chain issues and whatnot, consumer issues. But the bottom line was that certain companies had prepared for certain contingencies better, and they were better positioned. It's the same thing.
Those that achieved escape velocity.
It's the same thing with tariffs. And now it's the same thing with AI. we talk about the escape velocity concept. I just had a webinar about this, and I'm going to continue to hammer these themes home.
Jared loves hammering themes.
I hammer. Where's my hammer?
You're the new Maslow?
I'm the new Maslow, exactly. Yeah, you quote the guy enough. I might as well just be him, But it's this idea that
wish you were Maslow.
Oh no, Maslow wishes he were me. Come on. It's this idea of traveling at a rapid enough rate of speed that we can escape the gravitational pull of a larger object. And escape velocity in the business world just means, being responsive enough, moving at a rapid enough rate of speed that you can escape old business realities. And we're in that right now. We were in it during COVID. We had it with tariffs that disrupted supply chains for a whole ton of clients and people we know. And now we're in it with AI. We're in this one for the long haul. Yeah. This is not a 2 or 3 year cycle. This is a permanent shift. And when you have a permanent shift like this, you really have to travel with escape velocity. So we've reintroduced 3 or 4 themes we've talked about in the last few months, because ultimately, if we're doing our job, all of these things connect together. This is like a lattice work, it's like a tapestry. And so again, I do believe that we are at an inflection point right now where we have to look at these case studies and we have to understand what's going on. Leaders have to be adaptive, leaders have to be responsive, and we have to wake up to the fact that the job market is not going to look the same. But the fact that some people are being asked to come back into the workplace, sure. I mean, this is not surprising. A lot of people out there are surprised by this. This is making news. To me, this is a course correction.
So what I encourage all of you to do is to check out our website, wakethefuture.com.
Absolutely.
Sign up for our newsletter. The next one coming up is going to be on the power of I don't know. And those are 3 very simple words, but it really speaks to the humility aspect that you were talking about. And I think that Jared has a little extra pep in his step today because it was just his birthday. So Happy birthday to my Wake the Future co-host over here.
Thank you.
Here's to an amazing year ahead. And thank you for joining us.
I think it'll be a great year ahead. I enjoy talking about this with my delightful partner in life, partner in business. As Erica said, check out our site, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll see you guys next week.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, follow, and subscribe to stay ahead of what's next. I'm Erica Orange.
And I'm Jared Weiner. Thanks for waking the future with us. We'll see you next time.